talk some streaming and the streaming competition that's going on right now. Good morning to you, Jenny. Hey, this has been a favorite on Fast Market for many months and even years. And there's just more and more companies in this space now.
That you mentioned, this is, I think, one of all of our favorites. There's so many things to unpack with Disney, but starting with, they are down a little bit today. They are up 1% this week and about 1% this month, but more significantly, they are still down about 8% for the year. And this is, of course, due largely to the fact that they have this wide exposure to hotels, their theme parks, which were, of course, for so long completely closed, and in some of the summer peak months as well, which has not been great for them. However, they have started to reopen. They've announced, cutting their amount of people that can come in, and they have all these different health protocols. But it's more important to note, I think it seemed like it wasn't that long ago on this show that we said that parks and hotels and their products was the way they generated their income, the majority at least. Now, this has changed because when you look at the way Disney's revenue streams are now, 35%, which is the majority, is from DTC and international. So this means then their Disney Channel networks and their ESPN networks, as well as their DTC channels, which are Disney, ESPN Plus, and Disney Plus. So this is now the majority of their revenue, and this has changed. So it seems like Disney Plus has kind of been this hedge to protect themselves from their crazy exposure to, these crowded situations like hotels, like theme parks. Now, to go through, 31% is parks and experiences, then 22% is media networks, which is their Disney Channel and ABC broadcasting, and 13% of the revenue comes from Disney Studios. But the news this week and the buzz today is, of course, Mulan. So the live action release of Mulan, which came out last weekend, caused a huge spike in just mentions on social media and just us talking about them across the shows. So you saw that they had a 68% increase in mobile downloads last weekend following the release of Mulan. There was also the statistic I read that was in-app purchases increased by over a third because of Mulan's $30 price tag. Now, people were outraged about this $30 price tag on social media, which was cracking me up because if you went to a movie theater, it wouldn't have been free. You consider the fact that Disney has had releases, pretty significant releases like Hamilton back in July and then Frozen 2 once it left theaters. But these were all the re-releases. This was the first time a blockbuster film has premiered on this platform. So the $30 price tag made perfect sense to me. And this kind of brings me to our first tweet, which says, $30 seems expensive for Mulan on the surface, but for a family of four, it'd be $40 in theater, plus snacks, $20, and then still need to buy it later on DVD for $20. So $30 versus $80, a $50 premium for in theater. So that makes perfect sense to me, especially because in Chicago, I think it's like $20 minimum to go to a movie theater just for the ticket as an adult. So I think that makes perfect sense. The $30 price tag I would be willing to pay because Mulan is like a classic Disney film. And I did read a life hack from The Verge that says it will be free actually on the app as of December 4th. So just wait a few months and then it'll be free and everyone will be happy. But, when you talk about these streaming companies, it's important to compare Disney Plus to, say, its competitors like Apple TV Plus. We have Amazon Prime Video and, of course, the behemoth, which is Netflix. So that brings me to our next tweet, which says, I'm enjoying Disney Plus more than Netflix and Hulu. Now, Kevin, my question to you is, because it was about a year ago when Disney Plus first came out, and there was this great partnership with Verizon that gave Verizon customers Disney Plus access for free. So that's what I've been doing for a year, and I think that the majority of my friends have done the same. So does it give you any concern that this year, basically free trial is up for so many people? Like, what's Disney's plan for retention here? Because that concerns me a little bit long term.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to make first a statement about the release of the movie. Any human being complaining about a $30 movie release like that is both single and has no children. Because any parent of a family of four, like you mentioned, Jenny, would die to only spend $30 in the movie theater. That's getting off at about 50% discount from what you would normally spend in the movie theater. Trust me. Popcorn, are you kidding me? Now, let's get over to Disney and Verizon. Actually, Jenny, you have to think a little counterintuitively. The fact that that year is up may drop the subscribers, but the people that remain are going to start paying. So revenue will actually go up for those people. Yeah, the last year, the subscribers came in, but no revenue. Now, if you get 30% stickiness, 50% stickiness from those people, now that's new revenue coming in. So I actually think that Verizon 1 year period coming off is very bullish for Disney stock, guys.
No, I think it's a good point, Kevin. And I think the question that I have, at least related to the Mulan, is, did those people who were complaining about that $30 price tag still pay it, or did they kind of boycott it? So we'll see, of course, when they release some of those numbers. But Jenny, we got to leave it there. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining us. To say goodbye to Jenny Wynn and welcome in Megan Brantley, the VP of Research at LikeFolio.com. And we'll broaden this out here, Megan, a little bit on this Friday morning, and we'll talk all of these different streaming services and how they're doing versus each other, because it really is kind of a little bit of a trench warfare between these, but it doesn't necessarily mean that only one of them has to win.
Right. So I know we talk about streamers a lot on the show, and it's one of our favorite things. And this is one that we watched as a huge, quarantine winner. And now we're starting to see things, settle in. We're starting to see behavior normalize. And so it's a good time to check in and see how these names all stack up and how consumer behavior is shaping up. And on this chart, there are a couple of key points I want to hit on. And one is that, we often talk about Netflix versus, all of this other competition. And at least from our data, it's clear that Netflix is still the big dog in this fight, right? We still see Netflix new subscription mentions elevated among competitors and peers, but you can see normalization. You saw this huge surge. I would almost, at the end of the year, whenever they were releasing a lot of original content, and then also during quarantine, and that's since leveled off and normalized. Another key takeaway from that chart that we're watching is the HBO Max launch is actually going really well. We're seeing sustained new subscription mentions for that service. I think that Milan, this is kind of what put it on our radar this week. And what we're seeing is that while a lot of people who were already subscribers of Disney Plus splurged and made the purchase, I think that the date of release was the third largest spike that we recorded from a streaming perspective on Disney Plus. But from a new subscription perspective, it didn't really move the needle in the way that I think a lot of people expected it to, at least from our data's perspective. And I think that the key here moving forward that we're watching is, the differentiator for consumers is which platform brings the best content and the most new and original content, because that's what keeps people around and that's what keeps that churn down. And so now we've got a close eye on cancellation mentions, and we'll start to watch that, moving into the winter months. But yeah, for now, Netflix is still the big dog, but there's definitely more streamers in this space that consumers are starting to, pay attention to.
Megan, here's my question as I look over your data, and your data shows it pretty clearly. But what your data also shows pretty clearly is that Disney's in fourth place. As long as I'm reading the colors right, and I haven't gone colorblind, Disney is in fourth place below HBO. And I wonder if that's a demographic problem. Like, for instance, Netflix, HBO, Hulu, those are young millennial, or young adult streaming services that seem to be doing very well. Disney, let's face it, you're not getting any real edgy content in Disney like you may on some of the others. So I wonder if the family aspect of Disney is actually hurting it get a bigger footprint in terms of these streaming services, because clearly Netflix isn't adverse from putting out edgy content. HBO has some edgy content in its portfolio. Disney, not so much. Is that what you guys are seeing there?
Yeah, it's the new original content that tends to be the driver of new subscriptions. And so that's kind of why we were watching, especially ahead of this Mulan release, because this is, Disney's first big stab at new original content. And while in-app purchases certainly increased, and we certainly saw people actually splurging and buying the movie, Kevin, kind of like you talked about for the family, they thought, they're like, this is definitely cheaper than a movie theater. However, Did it bring new subscribers to the table who weren't already on Disney Plus? Maybe a little bit, but it wasn't enough to register a really significant spike on our end. And so I think that that's very interesting. I think whenever we look at cancellation mentions, the number one driver of people who are talking about canceling Disney Plus is, once they ran through this arsenal of content, they were kind of like, okay, what next? We saw some upticks whenever Mandalorian was released, but there hasn't been an influx of new content for them. So that's definitely something that we'll want to keep an eye on moving forward. And I think that that's where, your Netflix and even your HBO Max have an edge.
Megan, so kind of what I'm gathering from this conversation is, right now Netflix is the big dog kind of in the room. There may be the number one choice for many, and that's one that, many people are just going to keep. And so then it's, okay, what am I going to add with Netflix? What's going to be kind of my duo or my tandem here? And it seems like the other three, at least on this list, are kind of a niche, target audience. Disney maybe skews, to your point, more to a family. And honestly, if you haven't gotten Disney Plus already, what's going to drive you there now? And, and then I look at HBO Max, maybe it's fans of Game of Thrones or Entourage or Sopranos or The Wire, kind of those gritty, classic series. And then Hulu is kind of just like cable TV, just you didn't actually get cable TV. And so I look at this and saying, what Netflix is doing is more the unique one. Everyone else kind of has their niche. Netflix is kind of marketed to everyone.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good way to look at it. Netflix is also, I would say, whenever you look at how much they spend on original content, probably outpacing all of the other peers, which makes sense. I think that it's interesting to look at, at Hulu and at Disney Plus, because these are all essentially under the Disney umbrella. So I think Disney, when you think of the big picture, they're smart in the sense that they have multiple arms of content. They've got ESPN Plus, they've got Disney Plus for families, and then you also have that Hulu kind of live TV element that you mentioned. So I think that actually, from a big picture perspective, Netflix and Disney are positioned well, but from original content, that still is what's driving Netflix's strength and why consumers are holding on. We're not seeing a huge churn and cancellation mentions yet, but we are watching, these mentions of subscription fatigue. I think those are up about 11% in the last 90 days, like year over year. So that's not huge, but that's definitely something to keep on the radar. It's something that's growing and accelerating. So we'll be watching to see, okay, will consumers reach that tipping point and start trimming? And when they do, which ones are they most likely to trim?